So good evening. This is Laura with Nations Lending, and we're going to be talking about home ownership. And I have a fabulous guest with me, Frank Lancelotta with Coldwell Banker. And we're going to be mostly discussing the costs that come about when you are in the home buying process so that you know what to expect money-wise. So let me turn the floor over to Frank and have him give us a little introduction of himself, and then we'll start like a Q&A to get some good information out to you people that are looking to buy a house. So hello, Frank. Thanks for joining me this evening.
Yeah, no problem, Laura. Thanks for setting this up. I appreciate it. I don't do much of these video chats, but you know, it's funny. When people get ready to get into the market, first thing they think of is let's look at houses. It's a lot of fun. We get to see different locations, different things we like. We get to really just dig into a house and see what it's about. Mm-hmm. One thing that sometimes can be overlooked without even realizing it is the actual cost of buying a home. It's not, especially today's market, it's not really just the cost of the house, but it's the cost of the house, where the different monies come from. And today's closing costs are normally paid by the buyer. So it's important that the buyer understands what additional funds are involved in buying a house.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in probably the last year, I had maybe 5% or less of the contracts had any seller help, any at all.
You're right. I mean, it's challenging right now. The sellers are in the cat seat, as they say, or the driver's seat. And so they're not really offering because they're getting so many offers.
And in fact, I've had the buyer pay some of the sellers' closing costs, the transfer and recordation taxes.
I was just thinking that someone I was dealing with, they presented an offer and offered to pay those costs. It's a new and interesting way to buy.
Yes, it's quite a bit of money out of the buyer's pocket. So let's dig into those costs and just kind of name them and explain them. And, you know, we can't put exact dollar amounts for a lot of them because it could be based on sales price. But, you know, we can give a good idea of what they would be. So where do you start when you're working with a new buyer to explain, you know, what their costs are?
Well, first thing I like to start with, obviously we want them to get pre-qualified so they know we know what target to go after. You know, if they can afford $300,000, we don't want to look at $400,000 and $500,000 houses. So
and I love that you do that, Frank, because yeah, you got to have the big money to pay for the house. You got to get that tied up in a nice bow and ready to go with, you know, mortgage lenders. Especially myself.
It helps the buyer understand their real financial position, and it helps them gauge what budget they want to actually spend. If someone comes up with, you know, they can afford $400, but they have a discussion between each other saying we only want to pay $350. So it gives us, myself, the agent, and you as the lender, gives us a target to shoot at.
Yeah, because there is a difference between what they qualify for based on loan guidelines and what they can really afford to spend based on their own spending habits.
Right.
You know, and is that something I talk to them about that, but do you also talk to your buyers about that?
I do, because, you know, they look at the numbers of the house, and like you just said, that's one number. You've got to add in, once you live there, you've got to pay your utilities, your food, you got to pay for clothes, everything on top of that. So you need to have enough money in your budget, and hopefully you're not maxing everything out on credit cards.
No, we don't want credit cards are bad debt. Want to pay down those credit cards.
Exactly, bad idea. That's why it's important to partner with someone like you that can help. buyers understand, what they should and shouldn't do during the process and after.
So once the buyer is working with their lender, and hopefully it's the two, you as the agent and me as the lender, but they're working with their lender, they tell you they can, or the lender letter says they're approved for 300,000, then what do you talk to them next about?
So the first thing I talk about is, all right, so we're picking a number. Let's just choose 300,000 today. We're going to shop for houses in the ballpark of 300,000. So I explained to them that the way the process works is once you find a house you absolutely want to buy and to make an offer, you're going to present your offer with an earnest money deposit, or an EMD, as some people call it. And that's saying, here you go, Mr. Seller. Here's our offer, and here's $2,000 to show we're serious. So that EMD comes out of the buyer's down payment as part of their down payment upfront that goes into escrow. So that's the first conversation I have.
Now, is it possible to write an offer without having an earnest money deposit, that EMD check?
You can. There's verbiage in the contract that says, I will give you this EMD of $2,000 within X amount of days or hours, 2 days of contract acceptance. Sometimes we may write a check and send them a copy made out to a title company. That way they know you're serious.
But at some point in that initial time frame, you have to have some chunk of money that you're going to put in escrow as that earnest money deposit.
Yes.
So they have to have some cash.
Got to have some cash. And that's a discussion that's had up front with you. You've decided whether it's conventional or FHA, how much, we both know how much they're going to put down. They're going to take a chunk of that and use it as their earnest money deposit.
Now, is it more important for them to have a bigger one, like a bigger, more earnest money deposit? Does that help them in any way?
It's debatable. It is. I mean, it helps sometimes if you feel it's a great chance of getting it. Sometimes it shows the strength of the buyer. Other times, you may not want to do that and just give, say, 1% of the offer price, so that if something does happen and you're battling with a seller, you don't want them to tie up a large chunk of your money if you want to use money to buy another house. So it's 50-50.
Right. So putting down a good earnest money deposit, but not going too
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
I wouldn't go 500 or $1,000. I like to use the number of 1%.
Okay.
Close to 1%.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a good number based off of their sales price. So what other expenses, now that they've chunked down that earnest money deposit, what other expenses can they expect on the real estate side?
So once your offer is accepted and you've given your earnest money, so now you as a buyer have to choose a home inspector to bring your home inspector in, and that cost is paid for upfront at the time of the inspections. So if you're going to get your standard full home inspection, which is structural, mechanical, and they're going to look at the house from top to bottom. And depending on the size of the house, you could be 300 to 500. Let's say if you're in the 300,000 range, you're probably about $300 to $500 for an inspection for the basic. If you feel like you want to inspect radon, that's another 100, 150 ballpark. There's multiple inspections you could do. Chimney, if you're in Carroll County, there could be well and septic. You might want septic system. That's another fee. So you could have possibly up to $700, $800 in home inspection costs that's paid for by the buyer up front at the time of the service.
Okay, and the buyer pays that directly to the home inspector when they meet him at the new house.
Exactly, and basically that's their investment in making an offer on the house that they love.
Mm-hmm. And what is, can you just tell our audience a little bit, like what does the home inspector do and what do you get for, having spent those hundreds of dollars?
So a good home inspector comes in, he's knowledgeable with code, how things are supposed to be put together. He's knowledgeable on mechanical systems. He's familiar with roofs, how they should look. A good home inspector loves to do an inspection in the rain because they can go to the basement and the roof and see if there's any leaks. But, some of them climb on the roof, some of them use drones and fly overhead because they don't like to use ladders. But you get top to bottom, they basically dissect the house for the buyer's benefit, to make sure that there's nothing, terrible about the house.
Okay, and they get a document back from the home inspector?
So during the process, the home inspector is taking pictures. He's opening every window and he's taking pictures of the good and the bad. And he's presenting that in his list of home inspections. And if there are any repair items that might need to be done, he points them out. Critical or not critical, or start saving money for this issue.
Right.
That kind of thing.
So it can give them a good idea of what future repairs they can start budgeting for when they move in.
And they know what they're buying.
Now, what else can you do with that report? If say there are a couple items that are not up to great,
once you get the report, the way that home inspection report works is it's everything's time is of the essence. You present your offer saying, we're going to make an offer. Here's our $3,000 to show we're serious. We want to inspect it. And we want to have it inspected within 7 days. So within 7 days, if we find repairs, corrective actions that we want fixed, the report and the addendum has to be sent to the seller's agent requesting any repairs. And then the seller gets 2 or 3 days to decide and respond to that saying, I'll fix all of them, or I'm not fixing any of them. Or I'm fixing items 2, 3, and 7. And if that's acceptable, the buyer will sign off and you move forward.
Okay, good. And the other out of pocket that a new buyer would have would be on the lending side. As the lender, we are going to ask the buyer to pay the appraiser. So we send them a link and they pay the appraiser for his inspection of the property. And the appraisal differs from the home inspection because the home inspection is more detailed about every little element, whereas the appraiser, I would say, is looking for more big picture items or large things that don't meet code that he can see, like if he saw mold or if it's an FHA loan and there's peeling paint, missing handrails, health and safety issues like that. But the actual appraisal is for the lender to make sure that the property the buyer is purchasing is being bought at a price that is within, the market range of that similar type property, so that we have enough collateral for the buyer's loan. So it's protection for the buyer as far as have they overpaid, and it's protection for the lender that we have proper collateral for our loan. And those appraisals run in the 500 to 650 range now for an appraisal. Would you say that's kind of the difference? I mean, the appraisal is mandatory for the loan, but the home inspection is not mandatory for the loan, but it's highly suggested for the home buyer.
I have a challenge bringing a buyer to the table and saying make an offer without inspecting it. It's challenging, especially if we're working with a first-time home buyer.
Yeah,
I in good conscience couldn't say, yeah, just write an offer, it's fine. It's not going to do it.
yeah. I mean, it's very it's very important that especially a first-time home buyer understands what they're buying, and then the inspector, as they're walking through the property, is going to give them an education about, like you said, the mechanical systems and the appliances and how long you can expect them to last, and maybe pointing out some things like about the electrical box and that sort of thing. So it is very educational as they're going through the house to learn about these different systems. And it might be the first time they ever spent any time kind of focusing on the elements of a house.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because when you walk into a house, you have your half-hour showing. You walk around and you decide whether you like the kitchen, the bathrooms, and the garage, or the basement. When you get under contract, you get to spend 3 to 3.5 hours with an inspector and learn everything about a home. So it's very helpful and useful to the buyers.
Yeah, so it's money well spent.
It's well spent, yes.
So far you have out of pocket, you have the earnest money deposit, you have the inspections for the property, and you have the appraisal fee.
Correct.
Are there any other fees that happen, in that initial time frame?
No, I think that, I mean, that pretty much covers it. I mean, the different inspections could cost you, as little as just 500 or 400 or 500, or if, multiple inspections could cost you a lot more.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, the lender is going to require that appraisal so that they're making sure the house is worth what they're lending the money on. So
now what happens, when does the rest of the money come into play? Like, what are the other costs? Because there's definitely other costs that happen when you're buying a house.
So when you're buying a property, you'll always hear the term settlement costs or closing costs, and people want to know what's in closing costs. Well, first there are, the buyer's going to have to look into homeowners insurance. So that's paid for. The first year is paid for upfront at closing. So you have homeowners insurance. There are title charges from the title company. And there's a list of them, from title search, copies, couriers, all kinds of different charges involved with that. Boundary survey, different things like that. You're going to pay, the buyer's going to pay a portion of the property taxes for the first year. So if the seller has paid up through a certain date, the buyer has to pay from the date of settlement on forward. So you're going to pay some property taxes. In Maryland, the buyer and the seller split the transfer taxes, and unless it's a first-time home buyer, the 50% that the buyer owes is waived, and no one pays it.
Yeah, for the Maryland state tax.
Right. So there could be title insurance. And a little key to save a little money on title insurance is if you find a seller who is organized enough to still have a copy of their original title insurance, if they pass that number on to the buyers, they can get a reissue rate and save, 20%.
Yeah, that saves them a little bit of money.
A little bit of money.
Let's tell our buyers out there, what is a title company? Because some people might not know what that term means.
So the title company, they're involved. What they're involved in is they have a real estate lawyer, and they do title searches for each property to make sure there's a clear title to transfer from one owner to the next.
And the title is actually the buyer's legal document that says that they are the owner of the house. So obviously it's very important that this, what they call the chain of title, how it's been transferred over the years since the house was put on the land, has been a clear and clean transfer, meaning there's been no fraud involved anywhere that would, what they call, cloud the title and make your title not clear and not transferable until you clear it up. So the title company is the lawyer and the lawyer's company that handles the actual transfer of the title from the seller to the buyer. So it's very important to have a title company that's reputable and also does a good, thorough title search. And the title insurance ensures the buyer that if something were not to have been cleared or not to be, wasn't found, that that title insurance would cover getting that problem resolved. So, but there's quite a bit of fees involved in for the title company. So with closing costs, you have the lender's fees, the title company fees, and then we have, you were just mentioning like Maryland has fees. And then also depending on what county your property is in, you're going to pay county fees.
You pay county and state taxes and fees.
So all of those items go under the caption closing costs. So lender fees, title company fees, and then your, it's really taxes to the city, state, and county for buying the piece of real estate. And then the property taxes and home insurance go under the bucket called escrow. And those are your costs for the escrow accounts for making sure the property taxes and the home insurance is paid on time when those bills are due. So, and all of this adds up, I would say, depending on the down payment, they might need 3% on a first-time home buyer conventional, or 3.5% on an FHA loan, or if they're not a first-time buyer, they would need 5% conventional. And then would you say that closing costs run about 3.5%, 4%, and escrow's about another 1.5%?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good number to base it on. I mean, it could be different in the value of the home.
Yeah, it's going to vary.
But that's a good kind of a ballpark number to use, you know, somewhere 3 to 5% on top of the actual sale price of the house.
Mm-hmm. But it's really good for buyers to know that there's these different buckets. And I remember you did that presentation one time, Frank, when you actually had the buckets labeled, and that was a great visual. So you have the bucket that's labeled down payment, and then you have the bucket that's for closing costs, and the buckets for escrow accounts. And I guess you had a little bucket there for earnest money deposit.
I had a little bucket for the earnest money
that sits near the down payment, because that credits toward your down payment.
And I had the 5-gallon bucket for the loan.
Yeah, so that's the big money. The lender sends the loan money to the title company for settlement. Are there any other fees that we didn't touch on, or you think we should touch on a little bit further, define a little bit more?
The other fee that, I mean, as a buyer's agent, all brokers charge a transaction or admin fee. All brokers call it something different, and it's somewhere between $400 and $500 that most brokers charge each of their clients.
Okay.
So,
and then something that I hadn't really seen hardly at all in the past, but I saw the last year, was when the seller isn't paying full commission splits. And sometimes the buyer has to pick up a little bit. Do you want to just
I can touch on that a little bit. So essentially, most listings go for anywhere from 5, I'm probably talking out of school here, but 5 to 7%, depending on the agents. And that, let's call it 5%, or doesn't go to one person. That commission paid for by the seller is split 4 ways: 2 brokers and 2 agents. So the agent never gets paid by anyone but the broker they work for. So I get paid by Coldwell Banker. So all the money goes through the title to the brokers, to the agents. That's how we get paid. Now, there are sometimes the seller side only co-ops, they call it co-ops with the buyer side. Let's say they might only offer 2%. So there's a gap in your buyer's agreement and what the seller is offering. So in that case, it's possible sometimes the buyer may have to pay that 0.5%
Mhm.
to the
I
agent.
did see it a few times and I paid it myself. And I'll tell you that having a great agent is worth it if that's the situation. They earn that commission 100%, and they're very worth paying if you have to. I didn't see it on every contract, so I don't think anybody has to be like afraid, but it did happen more often than I had ever seen in the past. And the agents earn that. They do a lot of work that the buyers don't see, driving around, especially in the last couple of years, showing dozens and dozens and dozens of houses and hours and the contract and all the little details during the contract that they take care of. It's 100% worth it to have a real estate agent, either when you're the seller or the buyer. So tell us, we have a little bit of time. We've talked about the closing costs and the escrow accounts and the down payment, the earnest money deposit. So just what do you think about the market and where the market is right now, and what do you see coming up?
So, I have this conversation a lot with a lot of people because that's what we do. But, my brother's a home inspector. So we have a lot of family in the real estate business. And obviously I deal with you, Laura. We have these conversations probably weekly. But right now the market is still favoring the sellers, which is a challenge for buyers. And as we've discussed before, with interest rates rising, buyers that were qualified for, I'm just going to use a number of 300, are probably now qualifying for a lesser house in the range of maybe 250. So the longer you wait, the less of a house you can buy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're going to want to, if you're thinking about buying, first thing you want to do is you want to talk to your lender, Laura, get pre-approved. You're going to want to choose a realtor. Call me, Frank. And sign the agency agreement, whether it's me or someone else, sign that agreement so you have somebody actually representing you. Your job as a buyer, you get to choose the title company and you get to choose the home inspector. The other homework you have to do is just basically, talk to your insurance agent, get pricing on your insurance for the house that you picked, and just do your due diligence. If you like a neighborhood, drive by different times of the day. The morning, drive by rush hour after you go see it. Sometimes before, if it comes on the market coming soon, go drive by the neighborhood multiple different times of the day and see what you're up against.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's really still a seller's market. And what I see that is kind of a challenge is a lot of people are pumping a lot of their cash that they've saved into homes. At some point, money's going to run out. So, save your money, do your due diligence, speak to your financial advisor, Laura, your mortgage lender, and don't overpay just because you want a house. Don't go from, I want this house to, I just want a house. Then you're in a bad spot.
Mm-hmm. Do you see that the number of offers and the number of showings is going down a little bit? So could we be coming more into a little bit more balance? I know it's still skewed to the seller, but do you see it coming a little bit closer?
I think so.
Buyer?
I was searching houses for two different people today, and I'm looking at them, and where I used to see these houses that pop up that were on the market for, a day, I'm seeing 10 days, 7 days, 2 weeks. Houses are sitting, and, I've made phone calls to multiple agents today on a house I think someone likes. Hey, do you have any offers? No, don't have any offers in hand. So it's something is shifting a little bit. It's definitely shifting a little bit. Hey, good news. That's good news for buyers.
Yeah, so get out there, be one of the buyers that is looking, be one of the buyer that puts in a good solid offer, Maybe you don't have to go as crazy as in the last year. Definitely, we want to get your loan fully approved, not pre-approved, but approved, so that your contract really shines to the seller, and will definitely give you great personal service, all the education, information, and communication any buyer needs to make great decision. Frank, tell people how to get hold of you.
So you can call me at our office here in Eldersburg at 410-829-4856. That's actually my cell phone, so.
Perfect. That's what we want, them to call you directly.
Call me direct. I'll pick up my
That's
phone.
wonderful. And what area do you serve?
So I serve Carroll County basically, but I reach out to Frederick County, Baltimore County, and Howard County. And I've found myself in Montgomery County and Garrett County.
Okay. I know you like Garrett County. You
I
like
like
going
Garrett
up
County.
to Deep Creek Lake. Anybody wants to buy a second home,
Buy
call
a second
Frank.
home. I know
He's
that.
gonna
area
take you to Deep
back
Creek
by hand.
Lake. He knows it. He knows it really well. So that would be awesome. And I'm Laura Fournier. I am with Nations Lending. My number is 301-674-7716. We're a full service lender. We originate, process, fund, and service loans. Your loan stays with me for life. And we have great product. We can service everybody, and especially self-employed. If you're self-employed, I have the loan for you, so give me a call. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate your time, and I will see you soon. We can do this again. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
There you go.